Welcome to Arc Rambles with mildly amused Milksnake, where I overshare my thoughts and opinions on topics while playing Arc. Like and subscribe if you enjoy hearing me rambling. And today I wanted to talk about compatibility, especially but not only in romantic relationships. Through this video, I desire to share important advice on finding out how compatible you are with your partner and what kind of incompatibilities can you tolerate and which kinds you shouldn't. Because, well, you know how it goes. As much as we want to believe that our potential partner's flaws will smooth out over time because they love us, every older person who's been through that can probably tell you people don't change. And even when they do, it may feel very disconnected from how you actually asked them to change. Sometimes they even double down on the traits you want to modify. I even can put myself as an example. There's been times in my lifetime where a person who's close to me, like a parent when I still lived with them, would try to mold my habits and personality to be more agreeable with their preferences and lifestyle. For example, my tendency to be a night owl, or how much attention I paid to little details, like not noticing that something's in the wrong place and not fixing it. And honestly, I can see how that could be infuriating to someone like my parent who's on a stricter day-night schedule than me, and for the attention to detail aspect, her intense sense of order is way more influenced by changes in environment than mine is. That, and she often searches for items on autopilot, so when they're misplaced, she easily gets frustrated about it. But just as she had very legitimate reasons to have grievances with my way of doing things, I also had my reasons for operating like I did. My brain does not passively scan my surroundings and compare them to the map of perfect arrangement of objects. Often, especially if I'm not the one who misplaced them, I don't even know if they should be somewhere else than they are. I'm often way too in my head, not paying attention to my surroundings. To always be on the lookout for any disorder to fix would actively drain me mentally due to how my brain works, and moreover, with the behaviors I observed from her, I always thought, why would I want to be like this? This attention to detail that she has only ever makes her unhappy. She might not be able to help being frustrated by it, but I don't want to mimic this pattern. It doesn't bring any positives into my life. And with my sleep schedule, considering I used to work on evening shifts back then, to just go to sleep, to not risk even potentially disturbing other people in the household, would be somewhat of a self-sacrifice, because that was only viable time for me with my schedule to socialize and engage in at least online hobbies like D&D and video games. Sure, I could just plop into sleep and wake up earlier, but then, even skipping the part that I'm not naturally ultra creative first few hours after waking up, no one would be awake or free for me to socialize with either. So, to accommodate my parent more, I'd either have to change jobs, and I liked my job back then, or make my life very mentally exhausting and lonely. It wasn't anyone's fault, really. We both had valid reasons to want what we did out of our lives. We were simply incompatible in our lifestyles and personality types. But, you know, you don't choose your birth family. Unless my soul before my birth was like, hell yeah, let's pick the potentially extremely frustrating game mode for the challenge of it. Wouldn't that be a silly surprise to find out in the afterlife? But regardless, we get along way better with my parent now that we don't have to live together. And my husband is a tough sleeper, so whenever he isn't simply night owling along with me, he's fine. But that's why I think compatibility is extremely important to assess for people who you do actively choose to share the bulk of your time and housing accommodations with. I've read one relationship book in the past that my husband's friend recommended, title of which I can't really recall now, But I remember clearly one chapter of it that spoke on how we're often initially attracted to traits that are opposite of ours and end up infuriating us in the future. For example, a messy, relaxed, type B kind of personality fellow becomes enamored with a go-getter, organized type A, admiring in her traits what he does not naturally possess. Or a routine-loving homebody can catch herself very intrigued by her love interest's amazing spontaneous adventures and stories he brings from them. Maybe another person always relied on tight bonds and consistent support network, but they may experience a strong fascination with someone of a very independent variety, a lone wolf, so to speak, who may seem in a way more free or stronger. The book spoke of understanding where those differences come from, and if they end up creating unsolvable problems, taking steps to accommodate the other person or meet them halfway. Those are very important things if you're already in a situation when you made your vows of loyalty to the other person and you want to make the best of it instead of breaking your promises and uprooting your life. And I don't disagree with it. Chance that you'll marry someone who doesn't have a singular lifestyle incompatibility with you is pretty negligible. And especially if it's something that appealed to you before you actually had to live with it, being understanding and not blaming your partner for being that way is super important. Because if you initially admired those traits and lifestyle choices in the dating stage, you must have believed there's an authentic benefit to them, right? And therefore, trying to meet them halfway could lead you to facing your own weaknesses and limitations and move towards becoming more well-rounded individual. That would be a good thing, right? But what I would want to put on top of this advice is avoid getting into romantic and cohabitating situations with people whose lifestyle is dramatically different from what you want your everyday life to look like. This is just common sense advice. If you're not already married to someone, you really need to ask yourself, if this person never changes the way they navigate life, will I be able to live in the same household with them and accommodate that without wanting to jump off a building at some point? If the answer is no, then don't date them. Seriously. You can't find your carbon copy, and it would be unreasonable to dismiss all potential partners based on one or even several differences in habits, but you need to seriously reflect on whether you want to accept this difference. Is it something that you admire and want to see yourself emulate? Or is it more like a pesky flaw that you choose to ignore because you believe it wouldn't be a big deal for them to accommodate you by discarding that aspect of themselves? Let's take myself for example again. I struggle with eating healthy, to be honest. When I used to work physically intensive job, my attitude towards food was, oh my gosh, calories, nom nom. However, my husband had many health issues in the past and is fairly passionate about eating whole foods and healthy balanced diet, which requires putting a little bit more thought into what I'm eating. And while my lifestyle worked well for me in the past, I was never obese or overweight since my job usually fully justified my ravenous appetite. And my body's resiliency allowed me to push it on quality of foods I consumed, and that without necessarily suffering any severe ailments due to it. I'm still not so attached to that part of my life that I'd reject my husband's objectively better approach to it for the long term. It's a difference, but adopting it will improve my life and health in the future, with no important downsides to it. Is it rough sometimes to deny my cravings for high-calorie foods and delicious carbs? Yeah, it is, but I'm not being wronged by it. It's actually helping me. Especially that I ended up quitting a job due to a move, and I lead more sedentary lifestyle now than I ever had. Calories don't just dispose of themselves quietly as I go about my normal business anymore. I have to watch them. But what if instead of that, the difference in our lifestyle was something else? I would, for example, rather let go of relationship with someone who's very sensitive light sleeper. And that for both of our sakes. It's not inherently a negative trait, but I know my sleep schedule can become somewhat wild sometimes. And even when it's not, because I don't have schedule collision due to my job anymore, I can randomly wake up at night, kick or talk in my sleep, or just want to work on my projects late. And I don't want to live in a relationship where I'm constantly causing someone to be underslept, therefore being a hindrance to them. Same as I wouldn't choose to be in a relationship with someone who's too extroverted or super into parties and events, as I'm more of a homebody. Spending quality time with that person would almost certainly exhaust me beyond belief. In fact, I'd probably end up separating my routine from theirs and make them feel neglected for my own mental health. While I do consider myself to have a really solid social battery for an introvert, like I'm not exhausted by a day job like a cashier when I need to interact with people, or a whole day outing with a group of friends, I still like to have majority of my time off, just vibing alone or with one other person, or doing my creative stuff. I'm absolutely incapable of enjoying super large gatherings of people or anything like clubs, concerts, dance parties, or anything else that involve a lot of loud music and bunch of people I'm not even familiar with. What's more important too is trying to fight my nature to participate in that lifestyle would not be of any objective benefit to me, so why try? So I really urge you to think, is there any lifestyle choice or personality aspect of your boyfriend slash girlfriend that you aren't willing to accommodate or meet halfway? Is there any aspect of yourself that you think your partner is merely enduring and not appreciating? And if so, are you willing to change it? Or perhaps it's not feasible to change, either because it's a quirk of your brain that you don't have direct control over, like not being a morning person, or something that requires you to sacrifice something in your life that's important to you. If you can see potential areas of conflict, have a discussion about it. Treat it without hard feelings, but seriously. Remember, a little annoying quirk might seem like something bearable for all the other positives that the person brings into your life. But after you experience that frustration about it for a millionth time, you will absolutely start building resentment over it if it's not going to disappear. If it really is something petty, either internalize that it is in fact petty and train your brain out of being annoyed by it. Maybe even try therapy if you think you're oversensitive over something that on its own is perfectly harmless and you'd want to be more chill. Or, you know what? You can absolutely break up over that. If you've made no vows and don't feel like doing any self-improvement at the moment, just remember that then you also lose the good things about that person. Then again, it very well can be something that seriously inconveniences either of you, or would create a dynamic where one partner has to walk on eggshells around the other's sensitivities, or sacrifice things that are important to them just to accommodate another. That's not a very healthy dynamic, and if it is so, you should probably break up with them with no hard feelings and find someone more compatible. Don't marry or stay long term with a person believing you can accommodate their differences and oddities when accommodating them causes you suffering or exhaustion, or chips away on your mental health. Like, sure, relationships aren't always easy and they will require work, but it shouldn't be work towards one of the parties' detriment. Coming to a compromise on something should not consistently harm one or both parties. And even small problems can grow big if they're very repetitive. Please always make sure that things you have to work on in your life to accommodate another person in it are healthy for you if you don't have natural affinity for them. And also make sure that you're not trying to force something on your partner that would make them resentful towards you to implement. Last but not least, there's another aspect to compatibility. If you're in dating advice part of YouTube, I wouldn't blame you for already being familiar with it. You know, the love languages, coming from a book written by Gary Chapman. It's a theory that different people interpret different actions that we use to show love in different ways. Make sure to read that book or listen to it if you haven't yet. I really recommend it. It's not a sponsorship, I just genuinely think it's a must read. To the point though, while it's not impossible to date someone who experiences love differently than you, if you can find someone you think you're compatible with otherwise, and they also have the same or overlapping primary love language to you, your relationship will most likely be on easy mode. That's because the way you choose to show love, the other person will also interpret as receiving love, and this does not only apply to romantic relationships, but family too. Having matching love languages just makes communication a ridiculous lot easier. But again, we can't choose our families, so let's focus on romantic bonds instead. I'll serve my own one as an example. I personally bond a lot through physical touch and quality time spent together. My husband also bonds through physical touch primarily, and quality time is also up there, although he does put a little bit more emphasis on acts of service than me. However, for me, acts of service, while appreciated in the same way that a positive surprise always is, like, oh, that's nice, thanks, aren't read as much as an expression of love. I have grown to be very independent when it comes to basic sustenance, and I don't usually expect anyone in my life to do things for me that only I need to have done at the moment. I appreciate help if I ask for it, but if I don't, that means I'm perfectly fine taking care of anything in particular by myself. And possibility of someone else doing it for me haven't even crossed my mind, or anywhere remotely close to my mind. In consequence, however, my brain rarely goes to places where I'd feel like randomly doing something someone else wants done for themselves, just to show that I care about them. To express that, I'd be more likely to offer a hug or other types of physical affection if that's appropriate to my relationship, or be more eager to spend time with that someone. To speak simply, acts of service just don't scream, "I care about you," to my brain as much. I just tend to instinctually assume that people do stuff because that's what they want to do, and not to communicate anything to me. Of course, I am a sentient creature, and after discovering that theory, I can acknowledge that other people I know may communicate in that way. But if me and my husband didn't have at least one other love language in common, it would be much more difficult and less autopilot based to make sure we both feel loved by one another. And unfortunately, many people miss those as possible sources of friction if they don't introspect a lot, and end up deep into miscommunications, feeling unloved and unappreciated, even when each person is actually doing whatever they can to show that they care about each other. That's because the other person does not interpret their actions as caring. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't ever date anyone who doesn't share your love languages, but if you do, you need to be extra mindful and speak to them in their language if you want to show them that you care and love them. Also, you shouldn't expect them to instinctually decipher your language. Just communicate and introduce that concept to them so they can understand how to communicate with you better and why you might not respond to certain things they're doing in a way that they expect you to. In fact, when you're in the dating stage of your relationship, try to introspect ahead and explain to your partner why you react to all kinds of situations the way you do. Just try to get to know each other on as deep of a level as you possibly can, preferably before you even get too attached to the relationship. One tool that I personally found extremely helpful for that is doing online personality quizzes together with your partner. It might sound silly, but trust me, it's quite possibly the best way to ever speedrun getting to know someone. While the results of those tests might turn out goofy or completely unhinged, you shouldn't really treat them as conclusive, as most of those quizzes are made just for fun. The important thing, however, is to pay attention to individual answers of your partner. Those quizzes will provide you with a real ton of prompts that force you both to reflect on how you'd react in very specific situations and why. And that may lead you to inevitably getting to know each other much faster than if you just waited to see what happens and if a situation pops up in real life for you to observe. And you can jumpstart many important conversations from those prompts. I would really strongly recommend anyone who dates try this, as along with more serious 100 questions type of lists, it's one of the best ways to not waste your time dating while still carefully vetting potential partners. And moreover, you'll probably find it a fun, gamified activity, so it doesn't feel as artificial as interrogating someone from a list of questions. Some of the good ones are IDR Labs. They provide a bunch of fun quizzes, most of them silly, but with interesting questions asked. Just don't treat the results as gospel, they're not really scientific. I also wouldn't be against ones that treat themselves more seriously, like 16 personality types, socionics, etc. You don't even have to believe in their methods or typology, but the prompts to discussion that their questions and comparing your own self-reflection with their results present is a value on all its own. In the end, the key purpose of it is getting to know each other in a no-pressure situation where you don't feel like you have to perform or show off to someone. It's all about conversations, even those you normally wouldn't feel prompted to have right away. But having them is very important for getting entangled with a person who's inherently incompatible with your values, beliefs, and even behaviors and ways you experience the world can lead to a lifetime of feeling wronged and suppressed. And in the end, no one wants that. Don't ever proceed into a relationship, and especially marriage, in which you can very well anticipate this happening, even if it disappoints some people to have it called off. For choosing a partner is absolutely the most important decision you'll make in your life when you go about it the legal way. If you also feel like that's true and found my advice valuable, please give the video a like to show interest and drop a subscription to hear more of my thoughts in the future. I'm not gonna ramble a lot more today, so I hope you enjoyed this one and see you in the next video. Bye!